The Pokemon games were a childhood favorite of mine, and while I've had a couple gaps in time where my interest in the series waned, it's recently become one of my favorites again. The past couple years I've delved back hard into the series, and have caught up on several of the games and have not gotten tired. I've even dabbled a little bit with shiny hunting, and started creating a living dex in Pokemon Home. I admittedly tend to be biased towards the GBA and DS generations, since those are the ones I grew up with, but I do enjoy the games from Gen 1 all the way to the current games on the Switch. I think the core gameplay loop of the series works for me no matter what, so even though I definitely have lots of critiques with the newer games at times, like Pokemon being cut from Sword and Shield, or the EXP share always being on, I still find joy in playing them and getting attached to the new Pokemon and teams I have. So, needless to say, I was excited for Scarlet and Violet when they were announced and came out. I picked Violet version as the one I wanted to play. I didn't look at the version exclusive Pokemon beforehand, so my decision was mostly entirely because of the mascot Legendary. While I didn't dislike the mascot for Scarlet, I didn't particularly care for the design of it either, and found the design for the Violet mascot Miraidon to be slightly cooler, and the jetpack legs were goofy in a good way. I felt the futuristic robotic theming was definitely a different direction for Pokemon 2, and was more intrigued by that. And as I played, Miraidon grew on me quite a bit, which I'll discuss more later on in the video. This game is the first in the series to be truly fully open world, which was definitely something I was excited about, and I know it's something people have asked the series to do for a very long time now. Before this, some of the games had open areas like Sword and Shield and even more so Legends Arceus, but the whole map in the game wasn't all interconnected and you had to load into areas. I was definitely curious to see how Pokemon would handle this, as while exploration has always been a part of the series, the progression through the game's worlds and stories has always been a bit more on the linear side. Which, after playing, I have to say, I'm kind of mixed on the whole open world aspect. There's a lot in the open world that works well, and I really like, and it very much feels like how Pokemon is meant to be. Being able to explore anywhere and see Pokemon roaming about throughout the world is a lot of fun and makes the world feel very lively. I really enjoyed seeing and discovering all the new species, in addition to seeing familiar faces intermixed in. It was always exciting spotting something new in the overworld and trying to catch them, and in the early game I tried my best to explore as much as I could reach. Since I'm a bit of a shiny enthusiast, seeing large numbers of Pokemon in the overworld was exciting, as it definitely increases your odds of running into one, and I found 2 during my adventure. The first was before I even reached the academy, which I was pleasantly surprised about. It was before I'd gotten my capture card to record my footage, but I saw this red Pawmo standing in the grass, and was like, wait, aren't you supposed to be orange? And the realization hit me, and I began to chase after it. The other was further into the game, and I almost hadn't noticed it. It's very easy to miss them in this game, as they don't have a jingle or sparkle upon seeing them like in Legends Arceus. So it's really up to you to spot them for yourself, which is definitely hard for the ones with more subtle differences. I do wonder how many I may have passed by throughout my journey, and it's something I'm nervously looking out for as I go through my gameplay footage. Scarlet and Violet didn't entirely nail everything with the gameplay of the open world though. It starts off great, as they give you an open area to explore at the start, but it's designed in a way to still channel you to the academy to begin your adventure. After that though, the reins are off, and you can go almost anywhere you desire. Which sounds like a novel idea, but the gameplay balance doesn't reflect this freedom. All of your story objectives, whether it be the gyms, Titans, or Team Star, all have a set level that doesn't change no matter the order or direction you choose to progress. So, even though the game doesn't outright say it, there is an order of difficulty for all these events. So, that can lead you to either doing things out of order and having really sporadic difficulty spikes and drops, or doing what I did and look up the order yourself to get an idea of the levels of each to make your own path. I feel they attempted to try and organically channel you to specific areas, and tried to scare you away from progressing the harder areas by the level of the wild Pokemon, but there's ways around that, as it isn't entirely a solid barrier. I feel to alleviate the issue they could have gone 2 different ways. One is they could have had the level of the story events you go to scale depending on how many others you've done at that point. This would have been great, as it would have allowed you to forge your own path while still having a balanced difficulty. Everyone would have an even more unique playthrough too, as it would have made certain fights different depending on their level and the teams they used to match the point you were at in the game. It could have even encouraged repeat playthroughs, since there would have been so many different options to try out and how to progress the story. It unfortunately would have been a lot of work and time to try and balance out each boss for the story events and change up their teams for all scenarios, so that's probably why they went the way they did. So conversely, they could have communicated better the level of these stories events were beforehand, so you knew what to expect. But I imagine they didn't want to do that because it ruins the illusion of forging your own path. The way they did this wasn't the worst thing overall, but I wish they'd done either instead of an awkward and clunky middle ground. I did really enjoy the journey I had playing through this game though. It took me 41 hours and 10 minutes to complete the story of this game, which is around the usual length a Pokemon game takes for me. As per usual, the Pokemon are the center of the game, and it's great to craft your team and get attached to them as you watch them grow stronger and evolve. While it's certainly a subjective thing, I definitely like a lot of the new Pokemon introduced in this generation. There's definitely a lot I wish I could have used, which would be great for when I do replays in the future and when I try the Nuzlocke eventually. Lots of older Pokemon from across the series return too, if the new ones aren't of interest. I chose to start with the Firestarter Fuecoco, whom I named Crocowile, and she was very much the powerhouse on my team throughout the playthrough, especially when she made it to her final form and got a very overpowered move. I quickly added a Fido I named Purebred to my team as well, since I loved how punny the name was. It was my weakest link on the team by the endgame. But I was determined to keep using it since I love dogs in general. The shiny Palmy I showed earlier was also added to the team early on, which I named Birthday since it happened to be my birthday when I found her. I'd never used a shiny before in a playthrough since I usually find them in the post-game, so I was very excited to use one for once. The other 3 slots on my team fluctuated a bit as I tried out many of the new Pokemon, but eventually Squan the Toedscruel and Stroom the Orthworm became permanent members. Which, I love how derpy his face is. Like, look at it. I tried to use Dreepy for a while, but since his ghost type overlapped with Skeledirge, and I'm a dinosaur enthusiast, I couldn't help replace him when the opportunity to use a Spinosaur arose, whom I named Threes. The type composition of this team was unusual for me, since I've only ever used an Ice type once before, and never have had a Fairy type on my final team till this game. Usually I tend to have at least one older Pokemon in the party too, but not in this playthrough. It was definitely a fun team that I was quite happy to use, and I enjoyed trying out all these new Pokemon. I definitely like some of the features that help you connect and interact with your Pokemon outside of battle. I love the whole follow me thing where you could send out your Pokemon at any point and have them follow you as you traveled around. Definitely makes the world and your team feel more alive outside of just battling. My main complaint with this though is it seems my basic run speed is always too fast, and they'd always get sent back like every 10 seconds because they can't keep up. And while I didn't use the feature often, the picnic idea was cool, and it was fun seeing everyone, including me Rhydon, all hanging out at once and doing whatever. Seems like it might be a much more convenient way to breed your Pokemon too, which I'll definitely try sometime when I want to breed a new shiny. I feel the new Terrestrialization feature is probably the best generational gimmick they've implemented since Mega Evolution. Unlike the previous gimmicks, that pretty much were just a power buff to make your Pokemon and or moves become extra strong, this one feels like it has more of a strategic heart to it since it allows you to change the type of your Pokemon in battle. It does give a power buff to moves of that type, but it doesn't seem as extreme as gimmicks of previous generations. And it's a lot more customizable, as any Pokemon can have any Terra type, although most of the ones you catch in the wild will have one of their regular typings as their Terra type by default. You can find Pokemon with Terra types different from their normal types in raids you can find throughout the world, or you can get shards to change it, although you probably won't find enough shards during your playthrough, so it's more of a post-game feature. I didn't utilize it much either, as you can only use it once after each Pokemon Center visit, so I mostly used it during boss battles where they'd use it as well. Which, besides the Electric Gym Leader, most of the gyms don't really have much strategy behind the use of Terrestrialization, and it almost makes it way easier. But overall, I thought it was a neat addition that was way better than Z-moves and Gigantamaxing. The music, like all Pokemon games, is pretty great too, and definitely helps build the world and adds to the experience. In this game, they definitely do the music a little differently with the background music and wild Pokemon encounters. Instead of having a specific song for wild Pokemon battles, they'll have the background area's music transition into a more intense version of itself for fights, and then revert back afterwards. This definitely reminds me of the Fire Emblem games, which have done this since Awakening. I feel while this makes wild battle themes not necessarily as memorable as games past, it does help make the world feel more organic and helps the transition between exploring and battles to be seamless and fluid. And there's definitely some bangers in the soundtrack too, like some of the boss fights that I really enjoyed. There's a song by Ed Sheeran in the game too, which definitely caught me by surprise. As for the story, it's definitely one of the best ones they've had in the mainline games. I've noticed a trend since Gen 5 where they seem to put more effort into the stories in the odd number generations, which I definitely appreciate. The game has 3 different main quest lines you can partake in any order you wish. One of these is the classic gym plotline that leads you to the Pokemon League and having the chance to become a champion. Another is related to fighting a group of troublemakers known as Team Star and taking down their organization. The third is locating and battling Titan Pokemon to find rare ingredients. The structure of the challenges these 3 quest lines provide is different, so they're each a unique experience. And combining all the quest lines make it so there's a boss fight for each of the 18 types, so there aren't any that get minimal attention like in some generations. You also have fellow students helping you out during your journey that you get to know better as you progress, which I feel some of these characters have better backstories and character development than most friends and rivals in previous Pokemon games. I will be delving into some spoilers for the story now, so skip ahead to this point if you don't want to hear or see anything if you haven't played yet. Alrighty, here we go. The gym storyline is certainly the most basic and weakest when it comes to writing. I felt your rival Nemona doesn't really have any significant character development, nor is there much deeper going on besides just fighting the gyms and doing the league. I like what they did with the Elite Four though, with the entrance exam and seeing the members interact with one another as you fought your way up to the champion. But for the most part, this was just a classic gym run and didn't contribute much to the plot besides helping you get stronger as a trainer. It was still fun though, doing the pre-gym challenges and the battles. It just didn't change up the formula much and wasn't as memorable as the other quest lines. The Team Star segments are definitely more interesting when it comes to the story. For each one, you get to learn about the 5 leaders and understand why their followers love them and see why they started the team through flashbacks. I admittedly saw the twist at the end of who the mysterious Grand Leader was coming a mile away, but I definitely enjoyed this segment nonetheless. It was nice to have us going from seeing the team as villainous troublemakers to gifted kids who took their efforts to stop bullying too far and needed some guidance to get back on track. My opinion on the gameplay in these segments is a little mixed though. You start off with running through their base with 3 of your Pokemon out to assist you, which, while fun in concept, it doesn't really have much strategy involved, and the technical problems really get showcased here with noticeable frame rate drops. The boss battles are great though, and one of the most challenging fights in the game for me was against one of these. The 3rd story questline with Arven and the Titan Pokemon is probably the weakest overall when it comes to gameplay, but I feel the storyline resonated with me the most. These all revolve around finding Titan Pokemon, which very much remind me of the Totem Pokemon from Sun and Moon, and fighting them to get access to their lair to get a special ingredient for Arven, who helps you fight the Titans. I do find the camera angles in these fights weird and annoying though, as his Pokemon often get cut off from the screen. As for Arven's character, he definitely comes across as an angry jerk at first, but you quickly learn he's actually very kind at heart, and is trying to get the ingredients to save his gravely injured Maschiff, who has been his Pokemon partner since childhood. I very much have a soft spot for dogs, so this plotline definitely tugged at my heartstrings a bit and had me invested in Maschiff's healing process. To coincide with this, your Miraidon also heals and regains abilities from this plotline, so it very much influences your journey as well. Which, I love that this game involves the legendary into the entirety of the game and plot, without it being one of your team members. They did this a little with Nebby back in Sun and Moon, where he constantly pops up during the story, but I feel it was better implemented here. Miraidon is always with you, as it essentially is your bike throughout the game, and a key part of all your travels and exploration through the region. It has a rather goofy and friendly personality when it pops up in cutscenes too, and very much feels like a very affectionate pet. This gets you very attached to it, which adds extra impact as it becomes more involved in the final segment of the story. After completing the 3 plot lines, they all converge together as you are then sent to delve into Area 0 in the center of the map. The entire game, you're forbidden from entering this area, and it's definitely a very eerie location that has a lot of high-level Pokemon in it. A combination of the music and futuristic ruins quickly gave me serious Nier Automata vibes. As you progress through, you start running into more and more of the new Paradox Pokemon, which, in Violet, are all robotic versions of older Pokemon. I personally feel the robotic nature though makes them feel way more otherworldly compared to Scarlet's ancient Pokemon in this area. Pokemon games often get pretty intense when the story climaxes, but this is probably the darkest the series has gone, as you uncover all that's been going on here with the Professor, the Paradox Pokemon, and Miraidon's origins. I really like this change in tone, and it definitely created an intense ending as you fight the Professor's team, and then a heavily scripted battle against a stronger Miraidon with your own. Seeing Miraidon's been with you the whole game, it was the cool moment to finally use it in battle and see its growth reach its conclusion. It might be a little cheesy, but I enjoyed how wholesome the ending was and how all the characters from each of the storylines were involved till the end. I won't lie though, this game is incredibly flawed too. You can tell the game was rushed to release, and suffers for it. There's a lot of performance struggles throughout the game, and it's incredibly glitchy. The game struggles to run certain story events like gym challenges and team starfights, and doesn't even attempt to hide the issues. A lot of things in the game feel underdeveloped too. Like, while the cities have cool designs and various shops in them, there really isn't much to do in them besides that, and that makes them kind of boring. And while the academy is a big part of the story, you really have no incentive to return and do the classes there once the game gives you free reign to explore, and I kind of forgot there was stuff to do there. And they didn't even have a need to rush this game. They released the Diamond and Pearl remakes, Legends Arceus, and these all in a year period, so they could have spread out those releases a bit more and given the games more time to cook. These problems don't ruin the game or make it unplayable, but it's sad they allowed these issues to persist and make the games feel like they aren't the quality experience you'd expect from a mega franchise that Pokémon is. While its problems are an annoyance, it's still a fun game to play, and that's thanks to the fact that at its core, Pokémon is a fun series, which is hard to ruin. The core mechanics of collecting, battling, and connecting with your own personal team of Pokémon is still as solid an experience as it was back in its simpler days, and it would be hard to mess that up. It's natural for players to get attached to the now over 1,000 creatures in the series, and the variety of the ones to choose from means that you're bound to find one you'll like in the mix. The franchise's success is because of that, and they know it. The main theme of the story in Scarlet and Violet is finding your treasure, which, for the player, that treasure is the Pokémon you catch and raise, and the memories you create with them through your journey. And even the flaws in this game don't take away from that experience. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Would love to hear your thoughts or experiences with the game in the comments. I definitely will be having more videos on Pokémon in the future. I plan on playing the DLC for Violet at some point eventually once I've caught up on a few of my ongoing games. There's still a few main games and a bunch of spin-offs I still need to complete from my backlog. I also plan on doing Nuzlocke too, and making videos of those, which I'm really excited to do. I may even make videos reflecting on my experiences in the past with my older Pokemon games too at some point. So, if you're interested in seeing more Pokemon from me, or any of my other videos, definitely capture that subscribe button. And I'll be seeing more of you soon.